Yes, I forgot to unmute myself. So I will start again. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Responsible Tracking in Europe Roundtable. This roundtable is organized by CSR Europe and Responsible Tracking Partners. My name is Catalina Pislaru. I'm part of CSR Europe team. Here in CSR Europe, I'm engaged in different projects related to supply chain sustainability, including the Responsible Tracking one. And I will be your host for today. I hope the slides will also appear on the screen so you can follow me. Yes, thank you. So maybe you can move to the next slide now. Because before we go ahead and I present you the day and our discussion today, I want to tell you who is responsible tracking. It's actually a group of 11 companies, both shippers and carriers. And you see the logos here on the screen that join forces to basically improve working conditions for truck drivers in Europe as a start. The next slide, please. I want to quickly just show you what we are working on because later my colleague will explain this in detail. But just very briefly, of course, everything that responsible tracking does is aligned with the SDG and is also aligned with the main policy regulations out there. And very practically, responsible tracking is working on setting the standards out there, of course, voluntary standards for social compliance when it comes to tracking working conditions. Then it's working to check compliance against those standards, is working to build capacity among its members on how to meet the standards and how to go beyond that and how to meet the regulations. But what is important to point out now at the beginning of the session is that responsible tracking is also working on engaging in a dialogue with relevant institutions and relevant stakeholders on understanding what are the issues that truck drivers face, what are the policies out there, what are the expectations of all relevant stakeholders, including truck drivers, and looking for what could be common solutions. So this is why today we have organized this roundtable. And now, if I can ask the next slide, please. And now I go to the agenda of the day. We basically have now more or less than 1 hour and a half, and we have 3 parts in our discussion. We will first start with the regulatory framework, and here we have invited ILO and the European Commission to explain us the regulatory framework. After that, the second part is a panel discussion about how to move from policies to action. And for this panel discussion, we have invited different companies, but also different associations representing the sector and also responsible tracking to have a dialogue on that. And next slide, please. And the third part of our discussion today is where we want to have a dialogue also with truck driver representatives. Speaking about truck drivers will not be complete if we also do not hear from them. So here we will have an intervention from Ivona, a truck driver. She will speak from her point of view, but also representing the truck drivers out there about their challenges and their expectations. So these are the 3 big parts of our discussion today. We also have the option to have some questions and answers with all the panelists. Next slide, please. And now I want to show you how you can interact with us and how you can be part of our discussion today. Please use the live discussion function box that you have there, and you can either put questions if you have questions for the speakers or the panelists, or you can write in chat if you have any comments. Next slide, please. Also, please be aware that all the attendees and all the speakers are on the platform, and you can connect with them via the networking tab also beyond this session. Next slide, Sarah, please. Yes, and last but not least, if you'd like to hear more about responsible tracking, if you'd like to hear more about the other projects that CSR Europe is coordinating, please do not miss the CSR Toolbox function on the platform there. Next slide, please. So this is my short introduction, and now I propose to actually kick off the roundtable. And as I said, we will start with 2 keynotes presentations from the International Labour Organization and from the European Commission to explain us the regulatory framework for road transport and logistics. Our discussion today will be focused on Europe, but to come down to Europe and the specificities, if you want, I think it's important that first we understand the global perspective. And for this, it is my pleasure to introduce you now to Alejandra Cruz-Ross from International Labour Organization, transport specialist. Alejandra, I will give you the floor. Please unmute yourself now and also put the camera. Okay, good. I will give you the floor. We will move the slides for you. Please tell us what the ILO is doing on this, and yeah, also introduce yourself more than I just did if there is something else to be mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Catalina. Good morning, everyone. I'm Alejandra Cruz-Ross. I'm the transport specialist at the International Labour Office, and I'm in charge of sectoral policies for road, railways, civil aviation, and urban transport. Well, greetings from Geneva. First, I would like to thank CSR Europe and the responsible trucking partners for inviting the ILO to provide an overview of its work related to the trucking sector. So today I will discuss an introduction very quickly to the ILO and the decent work agenda, the ILO's engagement with the private sector, and finally its sectoral work in terms of the recently adopted guidelines for the road transport sector. Next slide. So just as a warm-up question, what are the first words that come to your mind when I say decent work? What does decent work mean to you? Is it dignity, equality at work, fair income, good benefits, safe working conditions, work that gives women, men, and youth a voice in what they do? And what about the rights to protect workers and children from exploitation? Do you think about inclusiveness and sustainability? Well, next slide. Decent work is a driver of sustainable development, and well, it includes 17 goals and a universal commitment. And decent work helps to achieve all these goals because it puts people at the center of development. Actually, global polls rank access to jobs as a priority, and I'm not talking here about employment, but work of quality. Next slide. And the world of work constitutes the work of the ILO, and we have a mandate to promote social justice. We're a United Nations specialized agency that was born in 1919, and one of our founding principles is that universal lasting peace can only be established if it is based on social justice. So we promote jobs and we protect people. And we stand out for 3 reasons. First, our mandate to reduce inequality and promote social justice. Then our structure that is tripartite, because we bring together representatives of governments, workers, and employers. And our means of action in the form of meetings, technical assistance, but we also have a system of conventions and recommendations that form a body of international standards when ratified. Next slide. So the decent work agenda is based on 4 pillars. I'm not going to go into detail. You have them in the presentation. Next slide. So the ILO itself has a very important agenda in engaging with the private sector on decent work matters through the promotion of sustainable enterprises. And this means enterprises that incorporate a balance and the 3 components of sustainable development into their corporate practices and policies, their own operations and along their supply chains. And enterprises are an important partner in fighting indecent working conditions, such as unsafe workplaces, forced labor, or exploitative practices. So the ILO's engagement with employers and workers includes providing support through specific ILO instruments, like, for example, the M&E Declaration or and the ILO Declaration on Fundamental Principles and Rights at Work. These are the ILO instruments that can provide companies guidance on a general level on social policy and responsible labor practices. Next slide. So the decent work agenda is integrated into 22 sectors, and one of them is road transport. And we've been catering to our road transport partners and the interests of governments in this issue since the first standards were issued in 1938. Next slide. So the last industrial meeting held for the road transport sector at the ILO, it was convened in 2019, and it was a meeting of experts that adopted guidelines on the promotion of decent work and road safety in the transport sector. Next slide. Here you can find a mind map and that illustrates all the subjects the guidelines cover. I think we went from a principle that decent work is fundamental to road safety. And the new ILO guidelines provide an updated tool and international framework. The coverage and application of this tool is truck drivers for short and long haul distance, as well as coach drivers on the long haul distance. And this in view that up to 25% of crashes involve commercial vehicles. So the guidelines tackle a wide range of decent work thematics and recommendations related to employment creation, working conditions, occupational safety and health, social protection, social dialogue, professionalization, training and contracting, formalization, monitoring and inspection, amongst others. You will see they are extensive, but basically these 188 paragraphs of the guidelines focus on one way or the other on upping the quality of employment of truck and coach drivers. They present three innovative aspects. They update 80 years of work of the ILO in the road transport sector, but then they present three innovative aspects to the regulation of road transport carriers. One with regards to chain of responsibility to a number of road transport chain parties. The other innovation is with regards to sustainable contracting and procurement. And the third one is with regards to the payments of rates for wage earner employees or non-wage earning contracted or informal drivers. I have included some details of these innovative aspects as a reference in my presentations, but I will not have time to cover those today. But what I can say is that it's a holistic tool, and the range of application will help with tackling what in some regions of the world is an elephant in the room, as these guidelines do not make a distinction between employed drivers and subcontracted drivers. They bridge a gap for policymakers and industry to tackle road safety aspects with their subcontractor operations or informal operations. And these operations are always a moving target. Also, the guidelines seek to help with the uncomfortable truth that in some cases, large industry players might have a robust road safety programs and measures for their own few employees that happen to drive, but not for all their subcontracted transport operations. And most companies subcontract their whole trucking and passenger services, and this is a trend that will continue. So these two attempts to cover the gaps in this sense. I will ask you to please skip to slide 20. I had included some information if you afterwards wish to consult it as a reference, on the innovations, on the paragraphs about exploitation, on the paragraphs about M&E responsibility. But then on slide 21, I just wanted to make a parenthesis that the ILO has published in June a sectoral brief discussing the main challenges and constituent actions with regards to trucking and COVID-19. And you can find that resource in the ILO's websites. And also we recently published an article that brings together the views of our tripartite partners and governments, workers, and employers. That's called The Heroes of the Road, and it also has a short video if you want to look it up in our website. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Alejandra, for this presentation. We have much more details in the slides that Alejandra prepared, but unfortunately, we do not have time to go through that today. However, we can share that after the presentation for everyone who is interested. Now, in the interest of time, I would propose to move ahead in our agenda to the next speaker coming from the European Commission, from DG Move. And here it's my pleasure to introduce Deputy Head of Unit, Eva. I will give the floor to you to introduce yourself as well and to tell us what the EU is doing on this agenda so that little by little we move the discussion towards Europe. So Eva, if you can unmute yourself. Yeah, we see you on the screen. You have the floor now.
Thank you, Catalina. My name is Eva Ptaszyńska. Catalina actually asked me to pronounce my own surname. She was afraid not to do it properly and properly. But not many people can do it properly, except from Poles, perhaps. So thank you for inviting me to this dialogue, to this debate roundtable. I've been working on social legislation at the EU level for the last 15 years, so I can claim myself to be quasi-expert on that, at least as regards the European perspective. And so I was asked to talk today about regulatory framework from the EU perspective as regards the rules on working conditions in road transport sector. But first, let me move to the concept of responsible tracking. Catalina already said who the responsible tracking is in terms of the institutional organizational setup, and she mentioned a few principles of working together. Alejandra also very nicely put together all the key elements of contributing to decent working conditions. So we heard about occupational health and safety. We heard about social justice, standards of working conditions, protecting workers, chain of responsibility, very interesting. Thank you for mentioning it, but also dialogue. So actually, when you ask yourself, what is socially responsible tracking, it is indeed not only about regulatory framework, whether at international or European or national level. It's not only about enforcement of these rules, which are in place. It is actually about the culture and building and promoting this culture of, I would say, co-responsibility for decent working conditions requires joint efforts. It requires cooperation. It requires coordination of actions at different levels, international, European, national, and in particular sectoral level. So I would say this is my bold key message to you regarding this this concept. Now, let me guide you through very quickly what the Commission is doing to improve working conditions in the sector. Frankly, this is the question which always appears at any session or debate concerning working conditions, what the Commission is doing. So you might know that the so-called social rules in road transport have been established years ago. I think it was in late 60s. And the main objective was to improve road safety. Those rules were then, but they mostly set up the maximum limits on driving times, weekly and daily, minimum periods for breaks at work and for daily and weekly rest periods. They were then complemented by the rules on the organization of the working time of mobile road transport workers. And this regulatory framework evolved over the years to address the emerging issues of growing competition, growing fierce competition, growing internal markets, subsequent market enlargement, gradual opening of the market, but also more and more acute social problems related to the working conditions. And the latest modernization of these rules happened last year with the adoption of Mobility Package 1. And here, regardless how controversial certain provisions you may find, it should be really acknowledged that Mobility Package 1, I think it's for the first time in the history of road transport legislation, Mobility Package 1 showed very clearly that social and market/competition rules are very closely interlinked, and that it's really very difficult, if not impossible, to solve all issues related to working conditions, to improve working conditions without eliminating the cases of distortions of competition based on illicit employment, illicit business practices, which actually result in depriving drivers from their social protection rights. So among key provisions of Mobility Package 1, which we consider to really contribute significantly to improving working conditions, is, for instance, the provision on regular return of home. We'll not discuss the details of that, how it's organized, how it's going to be enforced, but it's there, right? That the driver has the right and the employer has the obligation to organize the work of a driver so that the driver, if he wants to, he can come back home on regular basis. Then regular weekly rest in suitable accommodation, right to adequate remuneration of the member state where the driver international driver provides transport services, etc. But also rules on establishment, because I thought about this close link between social and market rules, and these rules on stable establishment of the road transport undertaking also aims to help preventing, eliminating the illicit business and employment practices such as letterbox companies. But of course, all these rules would be useless if they were not applied correctly, consistently by all actors in transport operation chain. And here I stress all actors. And here I refer to what Alejandra said about chain of responsibilities, because it's very important. It was there in our social legislation before, but quite vague. Now, a Mobility Package 1 tried to strengthen this principle of co-liability for compliance across the transport operation chain. Now, to ensure correct application of the rules, of course, enforcement is very important. And Mobility Package 1 also introduces very strong, some new enforcement measures, which would allow for more effective checks, for better targeted checks, risk-based checks of compliance with these rules. For instance, harmonized risk rating system of undertakings, access by road transport operators to the data on risk score, new version of smart tachograph also allowing to remotely access certain information on violation by inspectors on violations of driving time rules, and many others. Now, apart from that, one of the pain points of the trucking sector, in particular long haul segment, is the lack of safe and secure parking areas. And it's not only the issue of security of vehicles and of cargo, but most of all the issue of safety of drivers and of inadequate resting conditions. So to eliminate the safety and security risks that the drivers face during their transport operation, the Commission is committed to develop the EU safety and security standards and providing funds under Connecting Europe facility for upgrading existing parking areas and developing new safe and secure parking infrastructure in accordance with the EU standards, which are being now prepared for adoption by the end of this year, for adoption by the Commission. You know that under Connecting Europe facility in 2019, under 2019 call, we funded 11 projects for development on safe and secure parking areas, for development of 41 of such areas. And last month, mid-September, there was another call under Connecting Europe facility launched with a quite generous envelope of 250 million for safe and secure parking infrastructure. But now, safe and secure truck parking areas will certainly contribute to solving the problem, to addressing the problem of safety and security, but not necessarily solving the problem itself of adequate or inadequate resting facilities for drivers. And here I see that there's really a role of private and or public operators to make the business case out of this opportunity of getting EU funds and establishing parkings according to the EU standards. So what business case could be made by developing parking areas, not only the parking areas, but also entire accompanying infrastructure adjacent to the safe and secure parking areas. Here, I mean hotels for drivers, restaurants, shopping facilities, sanitary facilities, etc., etc. So everything that would really also help the driver to recuperate this this time, to spend it in a really adequate resting facilities. Now, I know that time is almost off, but I cannot skip mentioning European Labour Authority, which also plays a role in improving fair labour mobility and ensuring that mobile workers move together with their social protection rights. One of the pillars of European Labour Authority is, for instance, provision of information to the workers, to the employers on their rights and obligations, which I linked with labour mobility. So all this, what I've said, I'm finishing almost here. This is one last paragraph and last key messages to pass to you. All this is about, what I said is about moving from policy to action on the ground, which is actually kind of a key concept of this panel as well. But I would like to indicate that there is also another pathway from action on the ground to the policy. And here I would like to mention also that Commission supports also financially the sectoral dialogue, encouraging social partners to work together for improving working conditions. And such sectoral partners, social partners agreements can then be enacted as the EU law. So this is also another pathway to achieve this really good working conditions in the sector. To sum up, creating socially responsible tracking culture is the shared responsibility of legislators at different levels, of social partners, operators, shippers, forwarders. And I think that this event and the fact that we have almost all key stakeholders around the table today is really an important signal that there is a common understanding that we need to work together to make the tracking sector a fair, safe, and rewarding workplace. Thank you.
Thank you, Eva, for this very good overview of what, on the one hand, of what the Commission is doing on this agenda, but also the approach and the message towards the other key stakeholders. We have some questions for both you and Alejandra in the chat, but in the interest of time, I propose to take that in writing. You can answer to that in writing, and we will move ahead with the discussion. So the second part of our roundtable today, because both of you mentioned a lot of things that for sure the panelists are resonating with or can comment. So I would like to give them the opportunity to react to what you have just heard. I invite you both, if time allows you, to stay in our roundtable, and if you want to contribute further, you can. But to move the discussion to the other key stakeholders, I would like to introduce now the panel. So next slide, please. We thought that this panel will answer to the main question, how to move from policy to on the ground action. We just heard that there is also the other way around, but for today we will structure the discussion in that direction, so from policies to activities. In this roundtable, we have invited the International Road Transport Union, we have invited the European Shippers Council, we have invited CSR Europe on behalf of responsible tracking, and also next slide, we have invited two companies that are part of responsible tracking, IKEA, here with the IKEA Supply AG, and Raben Group representing the shippers. So how we will actually do it is that I will give the floor to each of the panelists to briefly introduce him herself, and then of course react on what has just been presented and tell us more about each is doing on the topic. So it is my pleasure to give the floor now to Raluca Marian. Raluca is Director EU Advocacy and General Delegate at International Road Transport. I see you already here on the stage or on the screen, if I can say it so, Raluca. So the floor is yours now. Please tell us a little bit about IRU, what IRU is doing on the topic, and if you want to comment to anything that was just presented before. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Catalina, and good morning, everyone. My name is Raluca Marian. I'm Director for EU Advocacy at IRU, International Road Transport Union. The International Road Transport Union is the voice of road transport, commercial road transport operators. So we have our members, which are national federations and companies active in the commercial road transport sector, trucks, so freight transport, but also passenger transport, buses, coaches, taxis, so the entire sector. We are also the social partner, so we are very involved in all social matters on a EU level because we are the representatives of the employers in the road transport sector in the Social Dialogue Committee for Road on the European Union level. So this being said, we, on behalf of our sector, we've been very closely involved in all European Commission initiatives and had our own initiatives as well in improving the situation of drivers on the road. We've been involved now. One of our main focuses of our work are the clarifications on what is let's say the biggest reform on social aspects in the road transport sector, I would say in the history of the Commission, which is the Mobility Package 1. The rules were adopted by the EU legislators last year, but there are still a lot of points to clarify on the interpretation of these rules. And that's one of our focuses, and together with Eva and her unit and the European Commission and the unions and the enforcers, we are working to provide transparency and clarity to the industry, but also to the enforcers on how to apply these rules. One of the main barriers, let's say, that we find we face at the moment is the fact that on the side of the member states, we need more clarity on the posting of drivers' rules and what kind of rules actually they have nationally, because they have to implement the EU framework. And having access to this kind of information, first of all, having these rules in place, having access to this information, and having access to this information in a readable and easily comprehensible form is key for our industry. So again, together with the Commission, but also with the European Labour Authority, we are trying to find a solution to this as soon as possible. Then other initiatives that we had this time also together with the unions, with ETF, where we're looking at the parking areas, and in particular the lack of parking areas in the EU, which affects also dramatically the working conditions of drivers. And we are very happy that the European Commission listened to our concerns and positively responded, and that now very recently the union published a call for funding for the building of safe and secure truck parking areas. And we saw 100 million from the CEF funding and 150 million from the cohesion fund. So these are all positive aspects, but the situation is of course far from being solved. And a last aspect that I would like to mention is also looking at the working conditions, the initiative which my colleague Hotfried from the Shippers Council will present in more details, but that's a joint initiative with the unions and with the Shippers Council on improvement the treatment of drivers at the loading and unloading points. of course, the conditions for working conditions for drivers are a very, very important aspect, because as you all know, we are facing a dramatic driver shortage today. And that's more in some countries. You've heard it, probably you are very familiar with the very intense echoes in the press as well regarding the situation in the United Kingdom, but it's not, well, it is slightly better because of the different circumstances in the EU, but it's getting worse and worse, and we do face a very severe driver shortage in the EU as well. So addressing all these causes for driver shortage in a timely and adequate manner are key to avoiding a very important crisis in our sector. But I'm sure that Hotfred would present more on regarding the initiative on the charter. Thank you.
Thank you, Raluca, for sharing with us the perspective of the employers. And you already helped me to actually move the discussion forward and pass now the ball to Hotfried. So we move now to the shippers' perspectives. So I would like to give the floor to Hotfried Smith, General Secretary at the European Shippers Council. So tell us more about what ESC is doing on this topic, how you are collaborating. We've just heard from Raluca from IRU about the Charter of Drivers. So tell us a little bit more about yourself, your organization, what you're doing on the topic, and about the Charter of Drivers, what are the results so far, and what we could use for further discussion and further food for thought. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Catalina, for your short introduction. I'm very honored to speak here. Perhaps we are the less known party here in this dialogue, because we are not part of the social dialogue with DG Move, and also not involved so much in the International Labour Organization, because for us, in fact, a driver, if he is attending our company as a guest, and we, in fact, our mission is that goods reach their destination at the right time, in the right condition, at an affordable cost also, and in the most sustainable way. And there, in the most sustainable way, there is a link of cost to environment, but also to labor conditions. And this has been distinguished only at a quite late stage. And now, what we see, and perhaps we are also partly to blame for that, is that the attractiveness of the profession of drivers is becoming a problem in Europe. And also Raluca was already referring to it, that it's really becoming a problem now also in the continental Europe. We saw, of course, the problems in the United Kingdom with all the shortages on fuel and also in their supermarkets, but we do not exclude that this will also come to Europe. And we think we have to take steps now, in fact, to avoid this. And for that reason, it's very, very important to go into a situation where we stop this development and come to a better situation. So what we did is, together with the unions, which are, as I said, normally not our direct partners, we developed with IRU a charter to make the working conditions at premises of shippers better. And of course, this cannot be done by shippers alone. It should be done always in collaboration with the other partners. And the charter is in fact a kind of memorandum of understanding for all partners. So it's drivers, it's hauliers, and it's shippers to do their contribution to make the world a better one for the treatment of drivers. So we structured the charter in a way that there are commitments for drivers, there are commitments for shippers, and there are commitments for hauliers. And I think if I go to the central elements, it's in fact communication is one of the most important ones. because you see that sometimes, you see some irritation, some misunderstanding, but you also see that, perhaps the care of the shippers for drivers have been minimal. And now we are, with this charter, we are trying to raise the awareness with shippers, but we also try them to do things. And if you see in the practice, yesterday we had also a meeting in our European Shippers Council, for instance, what people are doing. They are really creating a better environment for the drivers. Of course, not all of them. It's now the first ones who are doing this, but we hope that this initiative will increase and will have a better situation as a result. So what in practically situations you see that shippers do is that they create the minimum levels of sanitary treatment, like also separated ones for all genders. Because also there we think that the overall aim would be to make the profession also more attractive for in fact also groups which are underrepresented now. Before this workshop we said this is a very good gender balance in this group, but if you look into, for instance, the transport population, it's often male. But we need really also the female drivers, and for that reason I'm also very grateful that there is a female driver in this workshop today. If I look then to other situations, it's that what drivers tell us often is that they are stressed. They are stressed because there is often a bad planning with shippers. So they come to a premise, they have to wait there for a couple of hours sometimes, and then you can load or unload your truck. But in that kind of situation, it's not good. It's not good for drivers because they have also to build this into their driving and resting time schemes and so on and so on. So with this, it's really building up the stress. And what we ask also from shippers is to understand the situation where drivers are in. So next to this, we also think that the legal compliance is important. So for our for shippers, they should always take into account the legal framework and not push drivers to do something which is outside that area. So also it's important in the premises to, for instance, create safety walking and walking lanes so that people can move. Of course, this all sounds very simple, but sometimes it isn't, because we have also to do with other legal provisions, like, for instance, safety in chemical plants, where it's not easy to go into a plant, or, for instance, for AEO, which is a DG taxut regulation, where you also, for safety reasons, should be limited in going in. So we have some challenges to go, but I think that this charter is a very good start to raise the awareness and also to bring us nearer to our partners in the supply chain. And with this, I would leave it because also looking to the clock. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Godfried, for basically completing the perspective that Raluca started to mention, so bringing the view of the shippers as well. And now I would like to move ahead and to bring on the table or on the screen another panelist and another perspective. From the perspective of responsible trucking. So the organizers of the session today, responsible trucking is business-led initiative with a model of engaging with stakeholders. So now I want to give the floor to Sarah. Sarah, to introduce yourself. The organization, I think there is no need. I think you all know CSR Europe now, but tell us a little bit more about responsible trucking. what we saw who is in responsible tracking, but a little bit about the 4 work streams there and how all the things that were mentioned before, resting time, working conditions, facilities, how are they actually reflected. So I give the floor to you, Sarah, now. Unmute yourself before, please.
Yes, thank you, Catalina. And thank you everyone for being here today. So as Catalina mentioned in my intervention today, I'm going to present you the Responsible Tracking Platform, which is a business-led initiative we are facilitating from CSR Europe. So Responsible Tracking is a collaborative platform of 11 companies from different sectors working together to address some of the social issues they experience in their transportation and logistics operations, and also to be prepared for future policy developments. So in responsible tracking, we have 2 types of companies, both shippers or cargo owners, such as IKEA, who is here today, and we have also carriers or transport suppliers, such as Raven, who will speak also in the panel discussion. And our main objective is to improve the working conditions of the truck drivers employed in the transport operations of these companies. So how are we planning to do that? For the audience to have an overview about our way of working, the platform is divided into 4 work streams. The first one is about the standards. So in June this year, we released the Truck Transport Social Guidelines, which are a series of principles or a series of standards that companies, members of responsible tracking, have committed to respect and to implement in their own operations, but also with their suppliers. We published them after 2 years of consultations with the stakeholders, and we are covering aspects related to both working conditions and drivers' facilities. Then the second work stream is about compliance. So now, okay, we have the standards, we know where do we want to go as a group, but how are we going to check if we are having real improvements? So taking the social guidelines as a basis, we are currently developing a spot check tool, which is an online survey that drivers will fill out from their phones while they are waiting at the facilities for the loading and unloading of the cargo. It will be totally anonymous. And in this survey, we will ask them questions related to both their working conditions and also the status of the facilities they are working in. So for instance, we will ask questions about if they have access to a toilet, if they had access to drinking water, or when was the last time they were able to go back home since they are working in different countries. So the purpose of this survey is to hear directly from drivers about what are the issues they are experiencing. It is not an audit tool, and it will allow companies to measure where they are and also to identify the aspects to be improved. Then the third work stream, it's about capacity building. And in responsible tracking here, we organize activities for our companies to improve their level of maturity and their knowledge on selected topics. For instance, the last session we organized was about how to practically implement the guidelines. And here we discussed about the practical challenges companies are facing, but also about the feedback received from different departments in their companies and the different realities from facilities based in different countries, since responsible tracking is a European initiative. And here we organize both internal and external events. And last but not least, the fourth work stream, it's about stakeholders engagement. And in responsible tracking, we give our companies the opportunity to engage with key stakeholders. So for instance, when we were drafting the social guidelines, we organized a stakeholder dialogue with some of the actors present here today, including Ivona, the truck driver, or the MOVE, in order to receive their views and their insights about the aspects we should cover for sure in the guidelines. So as a first overview of who we are and what do we do, I think this is all. And I will be happy to answer any questions from the audience if any, in the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for explaining a little bit more about responsible tracking and what are actually the activities there and how can this be used to bring some improvements in terms of working conditions for truck drivers. You've heard from the perspective of, let's say, the facilitator, but of course, we would like to give the floor now to first IKEA and then Raben. They are part of responsible tracking, and basically my question to them would be the same. For IKEA, what are you doing in IKEA besides responsible tracking? How are you addressing these challenges, and why you join responsible tracking? And then we will also move to Agnieszka, to Raben in few minutes to hear from them. Now it is my pleasure to welcome Elisabeth Munk from IKEA. Elisabeth, you have the floor. Please unmute yourself and tell us a little bit more about what you're doing and your perspective on this.
Thank you so much, Catalina. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here today with all of you and together with actors all impacting the transportation value chain. So my name is Elisabeth. I'm responsible for sustainability in IKEA supply chain operations. And in supply chain operations, we are managing the global transportation and logistics of home furnishing products from the suppliers to the warehouses and stores. And we do this by land transportation and ocean shipping. And we don't own any own trucks or vessels, but we buy all of these transport services. So in my role, my main focus is on responsible sourcing, covering fair and equal working conditions for the people transporting our goods, and also on the climate agenda. And in IKEA, we are guided by our People and Planet Positive strategy. And there are 3 pillars in this strategy. It's about healthy and sustainable living, enabling a sustainable and healthy life at home for the many people. It's about climate positive and circularity, working towards becoming climate positive, and also transforming IKEA into a circular business. And the 3rd pillar is about fair and equal, being an inclusive business, ensuring diversity and decent work throughout our value chain. And for us, it is fundamental that all drivers transporting our goods have good and fair working conditions. And this is our foundation. It's deeply rooted in our culture, and it applies to all people working across our IKEA supply chain worldwide. And we recognize that there are challenges in the transportation industry that influence the drivers' working conditions. And we are a big transport buyer. We do approximately 2 million shipments a year on a global level. And as a big transport buyer, we have a big responsibility, but also a big opportunity to influence. So how do we work with this topic? And challenge? Our foundation is IWay. It's our code of conduct where we put strict demands on our transport service providers when it comes to salaries, working conditions, and following applicable legislation. And we perform audits, announced and unannounced, to ensure compliance. And we also do spot checks at our warehouses and stores where we talk with the drivers. And IWay was launched back in 2000 in our supply chain. And in 2005, we started to work with it specifically in our transport supply chain. And we realized that we needed a better transparency and visibility throughout our transport subcontracting chain. So in 2017, we decided to implement what we call a subcontracting chain management program, where we introduced standards, minimum standards for sub-suppliers engaged in outsourced transportation. And then almost 3 years ago, we took the decision to go further and to limit land transportation subcontracting to only 1 tier. For us, this creates a better visibility of compliance with our code of conduct, but also supports the carrier. And further, we do not accept cabotage as a scheduled setup for domestic routes. And we constantly work to improve the way our transport network is designed. And this helps us create better preconditions for the drivers to spend more nights off the road. And we're also working hard to shift as much as we possibly can of our transportations from the road to intermodal solutions, that is on rail, short sea and barge. And this means that the longer distances are made by rail and vessels, which also positively contributes to drivers' working conditions. They drive shorter distances, they can sleep at home, and leading to a better work-life balance. And in addition, of course, it also reduces the climate footprint. And we have today almost 50% of our ton kilometers in Europe on intermodal solutions. And these are some of the concrete actions and changes we've done in the last years, and things that we've done that we see are in our direct sphere of influence. But in order to really move the whole industry, multi-stakeholder collaboration is, of course, key. And therefore, we also value the collaboration we have here in responsible trucking together with other stakeholders. And I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. And last but not least, I also want to give the floor to Agnieszka Haik from Raben. Agnieszka, tell us, how do you see the topic from your point of view as a carrier? What Raben is doing to offer better working conditions to your own drivers, or to how to ensure that subcontractors also follow that? And if you want to comment on anything that was mentioned before, a lot of issues, very important, all shortage of drivers and also others, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and also good morning to all of you. I'm representing Raben Group, so the company which is operating on the 14 European countries currently, with 90 years of experience in logistics, a very huge history, but it's not about the history, it's not about the numbers, but it's about the people. We are responsible as a Raben for 8,000, let's say, means of transport. So that means that we are responsible for about 8,000 drivers that are serving and delivering for our direct customers. So I would also like to thank you, CSR Europe, for inviting Raben Group for the, let's say, platform that we had I think, important voice, because we were representing shippers. So we were able to add some additional information, additional view from the shipper side, from the driver perspective. When it comes to Raben and our understanding of what European Commission is doing when it comes to the changes in international transport law, we understand it as the aim of the keeping balance between driver safety and the social justice, stable economy. So this is what we are also trying to put on our activities on a daily basis. So a very important topic has been already raised when it comes to the driver safety and also the driver's conditions. So what Raben is doing when it comes to these 2 points is, like, I would say, a lot of actions, but let me give you some examples here. So what we are having is a so-called Driver to Be program. Also mentioned by Gottfried, the shortage of the drivers crossing the Europe. What we have currently is that we are missing 17% of the drivers in European Union. The biggest part is in Poland, 120,000. However, also in mentioned already UK, roughly about 70,000 drivers is missing. I think that everyone who is following the social media already know that Queen Elizabeth II was driving a truck during the war, but it's not a case. We as a Raben would like to, and this is our aim, to improve the driver's condition. That was also the reason that we joined the responsible tracking. That was the reason that we actively was a party that put our voice into social guidelines. But going back to Raben activities, so the driver to be program is not only to encourage the current drivers that are working for Raben, but also to change the perspective on the bench. Yeah, it's already has been mentioned by the presenters here that the working conditions on the drivers needs to be extremely changed, because the perception of the professional drivers is very, very poor on the logistic market. And this is also what we found in Raben, having a different dialogue sessions with our subcontractors and with our drivers. So the particular very small things we were started with, also said before by Gottfried. So delivering coffee, tea, drinkable water, shower, a clean toilet. We are going further on with some delivering unified uniforms to the drivers. But what we found also from this dialogue session is very important for the drivers to have a regular meeting with our management, so they can give their opportunity to hear the voice of the driver. We also engaging our drivers and subcontractors into our pulse check, which is the engagement verification. But also what we are doing is that we are mapping our processes in our cross-dock terminals. How can we improve the drivers? How can we help them? How can we improve their work, the working condition to support them? We are also having in mind so-called Drivers Academy, having still this shortage of the driver, which is challenging topic currently for us. What we are also doing, as a maybe last example, is we are implementing general terms and conditions for our subcontractors and drivers. I'm underlining subcontractors because this is what has been also mentioned at the beginning by Alejandra, because we are treating subcontractors on the same level as our drivers. So what we are asking our driver to do or delivering as a support, we're also doing with our subcontractors. So together with these general terms and conditions, we are having our ethic code for subcontractors. We are also having a whistleblowing opportunity. Also the part of our GTC is a golden rules for safety. This is what I started with, a safety driver. Safety for the drivers, it's a very important thing that we put on the agenda on the high level. And also a part of GTC is already mentioned social guidelines, which we will follow according to what has been agreed on the responsible tracking. Just a comment to the safety once again. I would like to also say that we as a Raben, we have been awarded on the World Health Congress on Safety and Health at Work. That was an international reward for our application, which is called Don't Be Wild. And I will encourage everyone to go into the safedrive.rabengroup.com and go into this application and check also the option about how important it is to understand the road regulation, how important the safety topic is. One more comment to what have been already heard here when it comes to also driver shortage, that's coming from the discussion about the mobility package, because it's very critical point for us. We know that the next step of mobility package will come in February next year, a lot of tasks are going around, and we already had what Eva presented. So a lot of, there is still no data of what we know, there is still no data to determine the average salary in individual countries. Actually, we still are waiting from the shipper's perspective how to calculate this average salaries. What we see that might be a huge increase from the current level of, let's say, about €9 per hour to €15 per hour, which is enormous growth. There is also a discussion ongoing, as we've heard within the Commission, how to respond on the mobility package requirements to return the truck to the base every 8 weeks, and how it's set up to the new Green Deal. So this is also an open question, if we can somehow influence here, because on the one hand, we have, of course, a working condition of the drivers, and then on the other hand, we have the topic of a new Green Deal. What we also heard from our drivers is that they have a huge question mark when it comes to the lack of proper infrastructure mentioned by Eva, and I also saw it when I was, because I'm today in Germany, I was driving from Poland yesterday to Germany about a long distance, and each of the parking among the A2 was completely full. So on the one hand, we have a mobility package entering in February, and then the parkings are completely full, and there is lack of infrastructure for the drivers. So that's the question, and the question raised by the drivers about the thefts of the trailers, because there's obligation to have a rest, not in the cabin anymore. And they need to leave the trucks on the parkings, which are not properly secured, and a huge, because what we found, about 80% of the drivers are afraid about the trailer can be let's say gone after they came into this not secure parking. When it comes to the action that Reiben is doing to let's say to change the perception of the professional drivers, is also some kind of webinars that we are taking, that we are organizing. And the last one in September we did was the one that we organized together with Iwona Blecharczyk, which is also being invited for today's session. And we wanted to, from Raben perspective, also present to the people that were interested a day of a life of the professional driver. So she's working as a professional driver, if I'm not mistaken, 10 years already. So there was a perfect voice of her to also to the people who were interested, that Raben could share such a webinar with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Agnieszka, as well. And again, you helped me to actually move to the next and the third part of our roundtable today. We saw that there were some questions from the chat, and also here we discussed among the panelists. So I think that there were a lot of useful and also interesting, and also maybe the discussion should continue between the panelists. However, I think now it's time to hear from the drivers as well. This discussion would not be completed without their voice. And also I see that Iwona is here ready. So now it's my pleasure to introduce to you Iwona. I will not pronounce your family name, not to say it wrong. Iwona is a professional truck driver. I will let you say more about yourself, but I know that you are actually working. Now you are waiting to unload, I think. So thank you very much for taking the time to be here with us. I give the floor to you now. I don't know if you managed to listen to everything that we just mentioned in the last 1 hour and a little bit. There were presentations from the International Labour Organization, from the Commission about the policy framework. Then there were discussions here from the International Road, from IRU, from ESC, and then from companies. So, of course, now we want to give the floor to you. We want to hear from you. What is your reaction to what was just presented? What is your daily realities? What are your challenges? And most important, what are your expectations for all the speakers that were there before you? We will move the slides for you. So just let us when we need to move the slides, and we will do that. So the floor is yours, Ivona.
Thank you so much. Sorry, thank you so much. I think it's the first time I'm speaking today. Yes, I'm on the road, of course, and I finished my loading and I moved to the parking. So I managed to hear most of the presentations, and I was delighted to hear that you are so very well aware of the problems that we are facing as truckers every day on the road. However, I think that most of the problems already been mentioned, but I, as a truck driver, if I've got the floor, of course I need to speak by myself. So thank you very much one more time for having me here. I am Ivona Blecharczyk. Once when I spent like too much time on the road, and I was so tired looking at the CMR, waiting in the office to check in, and I looked at my surname, I started to read it like Blecharczyk. So when you call it Blecharczyk, it's okay, you know, I made it myself when I was very tired. So I wanted to guide you very briefly today through the problems that we as truck drivers are facing every day on our European roads. But before I start, let me introduce myself very quickly. So I've been working as a truck driver for 10 years already, 3 years in a national standard transport, 6 years in oversized heavy duty transport. And meanwhile, I work in America, driving on the ice road, driving off-road on the oil fields, and of course over the road in US. And meanwhile, and this year I bought my own truck, and right now I'm an owner operator, still driving but operating my own truck. So that's it about me. Let's move to the business. So I would divide the problems that we have on the road into two sections, which are on the road and inside the companies. So what are the problems road associated? So it's been already mentioned, but very poor parking infrastructures. Truckers need 2-3 hours. Truckers need to start to look for a parking lot 2 or 3 hours before their working time is over. Lack of parking makes it very difficult for us to meet the law requirements, or sometimes it makes it even impossible to meet the requirements of the law concerning drivers' working time. After 1 month of driving around mostly Germany and this part of Europe, I think I've got already like 10 Tahoe printings out, because so many times I had to break the law because I couldn't find a parking lot. But it's already has been said. Second major problem on the road is very poor sanitary infrastructure on the parking lots and petrol stations. Showers and restrooms are nearly always dirty, which makes it very humiliating to the truckers. And of course, very rarely there is like a separate shower for the ladies. I've got to speak for ladies as well. Another thing is that safety on the parking lots. More and more often it happens that the diesel fuel is stolen, trailer tarps are cut, and the thieves break into the driver's cab. And the worst thing about it is that police doesn't seem to be much interested in helping and supporting truckers in that difficult situation. I would like also to mention poor access to water on the parking lot, and this is very interesting because there is a very good access to the water, but only on the roads, only on the very touristic roads. So there is a water access to the, let's say, civil tourists, but on the other hand, we're for truckers doing such a hard job, needing like access to water every day. There is none. So where the tourists are that use it like once a year in summer, there is everything. But for truckers, there's very often there's nothing. And what is very important is that there is also very heavy access to the grocery stores, on the parkings and pharmacy, which sometimes can be really stressful for truckers, taking into consideration that we truckers spend our life on the road and we need to make like grocery shopping and we need access to the pharmacy. That is very, very important. Okay, let's move to the other part, which are problems inside pickup locations. And again, I heard that you all realize what are the problems on the premises where we load or unload. But so first of all, it is of course very long waiting time for a pickup or for a drop. And somebody could think that it might be good for a trucker because he can have a rest meanwhile. But of course, the problem are there's lack or poor sanitary conditions. It is also wasting a driver's time. It is also wasting the driver's working time, which is limited. And as a result, when the trucker is finally loaded and it can leave, the working time is over, and still company pushes the truckers out of the company, making him break the law, which can be very frustrating and stressful. And as a result, also it can postpone trucker coming back home, which is also stressful. So I think that will be it. Like those are the biggest problems that we face every day, and all those problems put together make this occupation less and less attractive to potential drivers. Lack of respect, which is very important, stress, frustration, humiliating condition, family separation, and low salaries. According to truckers, those are the factors making them leave their jobs. I think that the key to understand the situation of the truckers is to realize that the road is not only a place of, it's not only a workplace, but also the place where they spend their entire life. And that would be it. If we answer those problems, then it would be just wonderful for us to work here. I just realized that I forgot to tell you when to switch the slides. Sorry.
No, it's okay. We did that, and anyway, I think your message was very clear. So thank you for that. Ivona, do you have any? Well, you just said it that your expectation basically is that for all the stakeholders here and all the other speakers to listen to that and to help. But do you have any particular expectations to when it comes to the ones making the laws, or when it comes to the organization that represent your industry, or when it comes to, for instance, projects like responsible trucking, where there are companies like IKEA and Raben? Do you have any recommendations
to make it like very brief and understandable quickly, if all the companies had like their work planned and organized and infrastructure like Dutch companies, which are, I think, like the best organized in Europe as far as I am traveling right now and working as an owner operator, and I see that just everything works perfect. So there is a place to check in for a trucker with the separate parking lots. In the room where the trucker checks in, there is like access to water, coffee, free coffee. There is access to the restroom with no problem, and people speak English. So I think everything works perfect. Of course, it always takes some time to get to finally to the dog and to make the paperwork and to ship the load. But I think that the Holland, the Netherlands, could be like great example for all the companies when it comes to organizing work in their premises. And when it comes to infrastructure, parking infrastructure, I think that France could be a great example because there are so many nice parking lots, and they are located not directly next to the highway, but just slightly, there is always like some separation between parking lot and the highway, which makes those resting conditions of a trucker a bit better because there is not so noisy, and there is like free access to the showers already, and there are more parking lots. So I think the France is a great example. However, when it comes to safety, I think it's already in whole Europe there's a problem. So I think that Poland is a very safe country when it comes to like thievery on the parking lots. And when it comes to law, I would love to see some change in law, and here I would like to put to give you the example of law of working time in US. I mean that there is such a thing like private usage of a truck, which allows to drop the trailer. Sorry, which allows trucker to drop the trailer and have like 1 hour, or I think it was 70 or 80 kilometers out, or like off duty, the driving time to go for grocery shopping or to do any stuff that truckers need when he's on the road. So I think it's just perfect because European truckers spend so much, like couple of weeks on the road, and I personally experienced it so many times that I needed to visit pharmacy, and I had no chance because I couldn't. I have to, first of all, I had to stick to the working driving time and to my tachograph, and I think it would be great if truckers in Europe had the chance to have like this 1 hour of private driving with their truck. Yeah, and I think that's the most important things that are on my mind.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. So for sure, a lot of good suggestions. And now I want to either look towards the audience to see if there are any questions or any comments. We still have some minutes for that. So please, if you want to raise any question, please use the live discussion box there. And also, I would like to use this opportunity to go back to all the speakers and panelists and see if you'd like to make any final remarks, or if you want to raise a question to any other speaker. The floor is yours. Please feel free to just jump in.
Yes, Gottfried Smith here. I was triggered in what Elizabeth was talking about, the situation at IKEA, because they seem to have it organized also very well in going back to their working force. Because I think as we are here in the platform, we don't disagree a lot amongst ourselves, but it should also be done in practice. And there with this spot visits, like he was describing, and in having training and so on, it's important perhaps to learn from them. And perhaps that's also a role for CSR and us and IRU to do something more there in making also the working force in the warehouses and so on and at the premises aware of this respect you should have for drivers.
Can I add to that? Thank you, Gottfried. I think this with communication and engagement is super important on this topic, to really communicate what are we aiming for here, what do we want to achieve, and also if we talk about these types of collaborative initiatives that we are talking about today, also, I believe that this is really how we need to work today in the fast-moving world that we live in, because there are many complex challenges, but also opportunities that we as a company cannot solve alone nor deploy alone. And I think there's a lot of focus on new technical and digital innovations, but I believe we also need innovation in collaboration, how we gather the right stakeholders around the table, the right people, how we efficiently collaborate to solve these complex challenges, but also capture the opportunities that are there. And I think collaboration tends to be most effective when we are able to slice the elephant and work around concrete topics and align very early in the process on clear common targets. Because I think it's not enough to talk about the importance here of collaboration, we really need to do collaboration together.
Raluca Maria here from ILO. I also have a question, because we are talking about training in general, and of course drivers get a lot of training on different aspects, but just a curiosity, are in the shipping for shippers, let's say, so shippers, do shippers have training also for their own personnel on how to treat drivers, how to probably how to handle the cargo they do have, but in more generally how to treat drivers?
Yeah.
As I guess this question is posed more or less to me and to also to IKEA. I think that there is not a general training for this. What in the framework of the charter we also discussed internally that perhaps communication training would be important, because you see sometimes unnecessary aggression and clarity between the parties. So that's really something to work on. But we don't have for the moment kind of communication training, especially not in all the member states. You see that in some countries they do, and some front runners do this, but not all of them. Then I think also I think that's related to this is the question that some national legislation is sometimes unclear. We see, for instance, in Portugal now you have a change in law where you relating to unloading and loading activities, and that also sometimes is creating for international drivers a lot of uncertainty. How is the situation in member state X and how is the situation in member state Y? And I think also there it's important that drivers, hauliers and shippers are communicating this information in a efficient way so that you don't get any misunderstanding at the working place. So it's really an important point, Raluca.
Yeah, beside of trainings, we can also recall what we are doing. It's about the dialogue sessions, right? So this is also the how can we improve the communication, but you're absolutely right. We are still missing a lot of information, how to understand some regulations coming from mobility packet. We as a company have a huge question mark, and our subcontractors as well. And also the voices which we are seeing on the different social media is that some smaller companies, some small transport companies, first of all, they do not understand and they don't see any challenges coming from the mobility packet. So yeah, that communication and different, how we call it, trainings or dialogue sessions, it's very important that we have to either support or even start such a dialogue.
Agnieszka, I think this is very important, and that just to qualify with what I wanted to say. So
half a minute, please.
Training more generally is important, and as I said before, clarification of mobility package 1 and the fact that member states are not clear yet on how they are going to apply the posting rules is a big issue. But it's also about, and that's what I meant, starting from the very basic things. So not talking about law and regulations. And we saw it's generally valid if you read our charter, it's quite clear there. But during the corona, it became even much worse when drivers don't have, or even in normal times, as I said, don't have access to basic facilities like toilets, and they don't, they are not treated, as we heard also from the road, from the practice. They don't even have, from Ivona, they are not treated with respect. So that's why training the shippers personnel dealing with drivers is very important. Not to treat them as a second category of people, not to give them access to anything.
Yeah, this is also
Yes,
what we are doing, changing the perception of the drivers. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so it's clear that 1 hour and a half is not enough for this. And I see Ivona as well, you would like to make a final remark. So I'll give the floor to you to end. But I just want to say before that, thank you to all of you for attending this session on behalf of Responsible Tracking. We will take all the learnings and see what should we do next. Also, it's a call for joining forces. So we are calling for everyone who would like to join Responsible Tracking to do that. And as mentioned, 1 hour and a half is not enough. So for sure, we will continue the discussion on that. Thank you again to all the speakers, to all the panelists, and all the audience. And I saw Ivona, you raised your your hand. So I will give the floor to you, and then we finish. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's just half a minute. As a lady, I would like to raise the problem of sexual harassment in transport industry, not only amongst female working as a truck driver, but also as a female working in the office. So that's it. We've got no time, but there is the fact is that during like last 5 years, for the percentage of female working in trucking industry, I mean, like doing the trucking job raised from nearly 0 to 3%, and then it stopped. I can't see any more women like getting into industry, and I think we need to all start thinking why it's going on, why there are no more women, not in such a big amount, let's say, coming like joining the trucking jobs, and that's probably for any other time. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you as well for making the time. I wish you a safe trip out there. And again, thank you all, and looking forward to continue the discussion. Have a good rest of the day.